Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. We have a great fireside chat webinar lined up for everybody today. We have a very interesting topic. We're going to be discussing what China can teach us about the future of digital. We're joined by two excellent speakers on this topic. Aoife Murphy from Vistatec, the Strategic Account Manager here at Vistatec, will be helping to host this webinar. And we're also joined by Colin Lewis, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of OpenJaw Technology, who's going to give us some real specialist insights into everything China and digital. So we're really looking forward to this webinar. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the webinar. We shall be recording this webinar, so everybody who has signed up and is here with us live will get a recording of the webinar sent to them in the next day or two. We will be holding a number of questions and answers towards the end of the webinar, and if you're not familiar with the software, you can quite easily look to about halfway down on the control panel. There's a questions or a chat box. You can quite simply type your questions in there and we'll answer them towards the end of the webinar as we go. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Aoife, who's going to take us through everything to do with what China can teach us about the future of digital. Aoife, over to you.
Thanks, Simon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. As Simon has said, my name is Aoife Murphy, Strategic Accounts Director here at Vistatec. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I would like to get the Vistatec advert stuff out of the way. So here goes. So Vistatec has been providing global content solutions to organizations worldwide for about 20 years now. We have built a reputation around our business and technology solutions that accelerate global commercial success for our customers. We understand that global content enables engagement, and so we match content and its desired impact with an effective localization methodology so that the intended experience and outcome is consistent and predictable regardless of language or locale. Okay, and now I would like to introduce you to our special guest speaker here today, Colin Lewis, CMO of OpenJaw Technologies. Colin, you're very welcome to today's webinar, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody.
So, Colin, aside from the great things that you do as CMO for OpenJaw Technologies, you're also involved in lecturing, and you're the founder of DMX Dublin. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, a couple of years ago in 2012, I had this idea to put together a big conference, a digital marketing conference, because I felt there was not enough coverage for that in Ireland. And I worked with the Irish Marketing Institute to pull that together. And this year we're in our 5th year and 1,000 attendees, and it's become the biggest marketing event, not just digital marketing event in Ireland. We get speakers in from all over the globe. It's quite a thing.
That's a great success story, Colin.
It's a lot of fun to put together, but yeah, you have to work your network.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So maybe now if you could tell us a little bit more about OpenJaw Technologies and also its connection with China.
Well, so I suppose the thing I want to start with, because everybody goes and says, when I meet them, go, what exactly do OpenJaw do? So a starter for 10 for everybody will be to know, what does the word OpenJaw mean? So the OpenJaw word is the name of a type of ticket in the travel business, which means you go into one destination and back home from another destination, and it looks like somebody's mouth opens. That's why they call it OpenJaw. So it's a lot of the one of the many words, travel speak words that are out there. And OpenJaw builds high-end e-commerce technology to big travel brands such as British Airways and so on, which I'll talk a little bit about, but brands such as Cathay Pacific, Hainan Airlines, British Airways, EMEA, I'll talk about the loyalty guys, the Four Seas, and so on, and basically enables them to sell the full gamut of things that airlines want to sell. In the past, airlines would just sell a seat and maybe upsell to a hotel, and our technology enables you to upsell to selling the bags, to the booking flow, sell hotels, sell cars, events, and what have you, transfers. And you might go and say, well, that's kind of by the by, I've seen that before elsewhere. Put it this way, it's a very difficult challenge. It's very difficult because there's a lot of connections, a lot of distribution problems. So it ends up being quite high-end technology. So that's what OpenJaw do. That's the first thing. The second thing is about a year ago, we were started by three entrepreneurs three techie guys about 13, 14 years ago. And the company was acquired by a company called TravelSky about a year ago. And TravelSky, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but TravelSky are one of the world's largest travel tech firms. So it's a kind of real classic success story of startup to acquisition. But the key point is that this company gives us proprietary access to the Chinese market. On the back of that, I've ended up spending a lot of time in China and understanding the Chinese market. And yeah, so that's some of the sort of information I wish to tell everybody about today.
Right, okay, and yes, as we can see from your list of airline companies, there's quite a number there from China, so I can see why you might have visited China quite a few times in the last while. Excellent, and as you say, yes, you were acquired by TravelSky, so yes, another success story, I guess.
Yeah, well, the TravelSky is basically, again, one of these brands you don't know of, and then when you start kind of like drilling into it, it's a classic Chinese story of where they go and develop their own technology to, if you will, take on brands such as Amadeus or Galileo, who people may have heard of. So the world, in the background, I'm sure you've all walked into travel agencies in your life and you've seen these little green screen technologies. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, the world's travel business runs a lot of this green screen technology. They're called GDSs, Global Distribution Systems. And TravelSky is one of these global distribution systems, the third biggest in the world. And they have 105 airlines right across 300 airports in China. And they're fairly big. Now, they're quoted in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, so they are but a sort of public-private company. But it's the behemoth in China. Everybody in the travel business China knows TravelSky, and everybody in the global travel business knows of TravelSky because they're big in China. And so that's the company who acquired OpenJaw.
Okay, very good. And so from all of that then, Colin, what would your main observations be about, I suppose, the Chinese consumer and growing your business in China? And I suppose with that, what should brands be doing to appeal to consumers, I suppose, when they're at home in China and also as they travel?
Well, that is a tricky one to answer because it's hard to know even to start. And I'll kind of start with a story. And the story is of me going to Shanghai last September and going in there and going, okay, I think I've just landed on Mars, albeit a more highly developed version that I thought Mars was going to be, just simply because the queues appear to be, the queues as in the CUES, the queue appears to be, I can think I know where I am, I know what's going on, but then as you get further and further into it, you realize it's a lot different to what we experience in the West. And in fact, instead of this kind of preconception that I had that maybe China is behind, now I've actually come to realize that China is ahead in many respects. And I know we're going to talk about some of these things, but that's definitely my real mindset now. Is I actually look to China on a number of things and see where they're actually ahead. So, as an example, I think they're ahead of us on mobile. I see the future of social is what's going through China, the future of e-commerce, future of payment, the future of travel, future of competition, and even think the future of entrepreneurship. So because there's a very interesting discussion around entrepreneurship, which I did a load of research on, which I'll talk to people about as well.
Yeah. And then just on mobile then, what was your take on mobile and the future of mobile in relation to China?
I suppose the first thing is that we're kind of sitting tooting away here in Europe thinking, well, we're fairly advanced in mobile, but China, like many other developing markets, didn't really do that pattern of going from PC to laptop to smartphone. They just went straight to smartphone and never engaged with a website. And the Chinese technology industry have brands such as Xiaomi and Huawei, which are these incredible build quality mobile phones and incredibly long battery life that look great. And the one thing that you will note if you go to Shanghai, go to Beijing, whatever, is people live their life through their mobile phone. You think we're addicted here. It's like the sheer ubiquity is incredible. And they've got 700 million people, internet users on mobile phone, 700 internet users in China, 700 million, I should say. And of those, 600 million are actually accessing the internet on a mobile device. So if we just take a European perspective, the population of Europe, or whatever, say 500 million, well, more than the whole population of Europe accesses the internet via mobile device in China. Okay, and it's barely started because the population of China is 1.3 billion. Sure. So in the West, we say, what's our strategy for mobile? How do we think about mobile? In China, mobile is the strategy.
Yeah, and how does that play out then in terms of social, and how does that connect with say, social media, etc.?
So if you imagine our kind of frame here, in the West, was like, well, I'll go online, I'll maybe search through a browser, and I'll go to that. That's not how it's done in China. Because of the size of the market and the power of certain brands such as Tencent or Baidu and so on. And actually, I should clarify here, the Western brands have their direct comparison with Chinese brands, but they're only done in Chinese. So Baidu is the search engine, just kind of like Google. There's a couple of other ones, QQ, a little bit like, say, Twitter. But actually, there's the one app to rule them all, as they call it, is WeChat. And WeChat is basically WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Facebook, and Twitter, with Skype and FaceTime all rolled into one. And that has about 770 million users every day. And it's grown from very little in 2013 to this kind of monster that essentially everything in China operates on. And I need to give you the context here, is that, remember, there's no Google, no Facebook, no Twitter, no YouTube in China. They're barred by the Great Chinese Firewall, okay? Sure. And so the one thing people use is WeChat. And WeChat is for people you've never met, to people, and you just immediately meet them, you engage on WeChat, or to, you and your friends organizing a night out. The rise of it is tied in with the QR code. That's why I have this very bad visual showing a QR code, which I'm sure you were looking at going, what the hell is the QR code doing on a presentation in 2017? Well, when you meet a Chinese person, Aoife, they will hand you your business card, and then they'll turn around, switch on their scanner on their WeChat account, which will automatically scan in like a second, and then automatically upload it as their WeChat person, and they can follow them on WeChat. It happens like literally automatically. And this QR code is the magic sauce, and you can pay for everything. I know we're going to talk about payment mechanisms, but it's hard for us in the West to get our head around. QR codes are it. That's where it's at in China.
So is that something that we in the West should consider for the Chinese traveller, perhaps?
Yes, and with the ubiquity of the Chinese traveller and the scale of that market, I know here in Dublin there's a number of outlets and a number of stores that do accept the QR codes and so on, and it is essentially, they can't function without QR codes. I was running a conference in China there in September, and the locals came up to me going, why did you hand out hard copy brochures? Why didn't you just give us a scanned code, QR code for us to scan them in? Sure. And it's just a very different frame,
Yeah, and you mentioned there then about the payment side of things. I guess this all comes together with the social and the QR codes and the mobile as well, and that you said they almost skipped a mobile, they skipped a payment method in there somewhere, and it's all mobile.
Yeah, I suppose the thing, if we just kind of take a step back and go, okay, we've got these great tools such as Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp and what have you, and they're pretty good, there's no way about it. But there's still a bit of friction in setting things up, if you will. There's how do you can't go pay for something with WhatsApp, and you can't, necessarily these days do too much with Facebook Messenger and customer service. So it's still a bit of a friction. But WeChat and particularly Alibaba have set up their own payment mechanisms, and they've literally taken on the banks. And so Alipay, which I'm sure most people on this call have heard of Alibaba, which was one of the largest IPOs ever in 2014, turning over 230 billion. But Alipay is their payment mechanism, and WeChat has their own payment mechanism as well. So your bank account is directly connected to your WeChat account, which you pay through QR codes. So imagine you're walking down the street in Shanghai or Beijing, and you see a noodle bar you like, and you say, I'd like that noodle, I want the noodles. You just wave the QR code, your QR code, over the QR code for the noodle bar, and the money gets transferred from your bank account to his bank account without any cash. And there's a very evocative video on the New York Times website talking about a particular restaurant in in Beijing, where you walk in, it's a noodle bar, there's no waiters, there's no menu, there's no cashiers, there's no nothing. There's just a chef. And so you walk in and you download you QR code the menu, you see what you want, you press a button on the app in WeChat to order what you want, which then gets delivered on one of these little rotating things which one sees in sushi bars everywhere, and kind of train tracks going around the restaurant. And then you eat your food. You pay for your food through the QR code again, and then you write your review, take a picture of your food, write your review, all done through WeChat. They never leave the app.
Yeah, and all of this serving a population the size of China, so the mind boggles, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way our mind boggles at the scale and all the rest of it, and their mind boggles that we don't have QR codes and payment mechanisms like WeChat. So that's why when I talk, I go and say, I've seen the future, and it's China, because they are literally much further ahead with their use of apps. People live on the apps, you know. Yeah. That's why I say it's also, to a certain extent, the future of e-commerce.
Okay, and tell us maybe a little bit, yeah. So, and that all feeds back into the e-commerce side of things also. And then, and then overall, then just in general about the future of travel in this context.
Yeah, well, the travel one is very interesting. Obviously, you can see that there's 234 million people talking about forecast to go travel over the next number of years, but there's a little more subtleties going on behind the scenes. So if you just go and take, say, the orders of aircraft around the globe, so the forecast from Boeing is that there'll be 15 to 16,000 aircraft required in Asia in the next 20 years, which is fine, except when you find out that of those, that Europe and the States may account for only 5,000 or 6,000. So you're talking 3 times the amount of aircraft are going to be ordered, and you can obviously work out the ripple effect of that through supply chains. The second one is that China has now become the largest source of international travel, overtaking the US in 2014. And it's because of the growth of the middle class, making it just much more achievable. And this is feeding into the success of the likes of Hainan Airlines or Sichuan Airlines, which makes the Chinese traveler a much more accessible consumer. And just to give people a sense of the scale here, there's an airline who is a customer of OpenJo called Hainan Airlines, and you may or may not have heard, you may have seen them around the place. But Hainan Airlines have 148 aircraft. And to give you a flavour of that scale, the national carrier of Ireland is called Aer Lingus, and they've got 48 aircraft. Sichuan Airlines have over 100 aircraft, and China United Airlines, who you probably haven't heard of, have number in the 70s. That doesn't include the likes of Air China, who have amongst the biggest fleets in the world. So there's this, the Chinese traveler themselves then are becoming really the top spenders on a per trip. And it's a little bit of a cliche, but Chinese travelers love high-end stuff, love shopping, and cities are the primary attraction. Nearly like 90% plus of Chinese outbound travel spending is just in the global cities. So it's an interesting thing, as if you just take the layer of, first of all, they've more access, Secondly, they have more money. Thirdly, there's a growing middle class. Fourthly, they like going to cities. And fifth, they like spending money on high-end gifts. So it's very, very different. And they get frustrated, obviously, because they're living in this country where WeChat is used and brands, QR codes are used, and so on. So hotels are actually fixing and changing their offering through this. So when you get to your hotel room, you scan in your unique QR code for you, and your in-room app controls the temperature and the lighting, all payable through WeChat Pay for what you do. You see how this totally permeation, if you will, if that's the word, of how the QR code and the app permeates every single thing of how people think.
So the Chinese traveller is definitely a target market that we can't ignore.
It's the biggest target market, actually, of the Europeans at the moment is Thailand and in Asia, obviously. But they've got a lot of what way can I put it? The growth is there, the want is there. They're very much this is what they want to do, and the travel is seen as quite prestigious, particularly for middle class people.
Okay, sure. And changing track slightly, then, I wanted to ask you more on Chinese businesses, if you will. From what you've experienced, what can we learn about the way in which businesses are organized, or what do you think are the main differences between, we'll say, Chinese business and a business in the West?
There's one thing, which is obviously that there is reasonable amount of state control. The Chinese government choose winners in certain key categories, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. So that's one slight difference with many aspects of the West, but that is not uncommon in other markets. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's the type of competition, and the Chinese kind of customer is. The Chinese customer, the Chinese competitor, see competition and an advantage, competitive advantage in particular, as only temporary. And they really see that companies must really continuously generate new sources of advantage and new change as a key source of opportunity for growth. Because the market is so dynamic and it's moving so fast, they really just see competitive advantage as temporary. And in my MBA speak, it's called strategy is emergent rather than something very specific. And the comparison in the West is there's a lot of discussion even in economic terms about how we got to focus on this and do this particular thing, stick to the knitting. They don't think like that at all. They see advantages as just purely temporary, and reinvention is at the heart of all the company's activities. So Tencent weren't doing WeChat in 2013. They were doing a couple of messaging apps and they were doing a couple of other things. And then they iterated substantially till they got one that they liked, which is WeChat. And then actually it kind of really took off. They actually, they're heavily influenced. There's a very interesting book on this. They're heavily influenced by a book in the late 90s called Competing on the Edge. And they basically say businesses operate between order and chaos. Because of that, I kind of see that these entrepreneurs, these famous entrepreneurs we've heard of, the likes of Jack Ma and so on, they're really, the likes of Huawei was built up from nothing by one guy. Xiaomi was built up from nothing by another guy. And they built up these phenomenal businesses through the power of their personality in a really uber competitive market where it's no holds barred. And you'd have to argue that some of these companies, like the GAFA, as we call them, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, they're leading the charge, but they're kind of in different domains in many parts. But actually, in the Chinese world, they compete directly. Their equivalents compete directly against each other, and it's a game not of chess, but very fast-moving boxing that happens all the time, and that's their mindset.
Sure. Yeah, it brings me to my next question, which was around, I had read an article in The Economist recently about some of China's internet giants going global, the likes of Alibaba and Tencent, and it was all around, does the West need to be worried, if you like. And the audience there, you can see on your screens, a couple of the points that I picked out of that article were that Western companies focus on core areas, but Chinese do everything cloud to digital payments, for example, like WeChat, that their internet sector is more lightly regulated. We'll say that in the West, where Apple, Facebook, or Google are facing a lot more scrutiny. And then also that perhaps it's easier for Chinese firms to succeed so rapidly locally, because we'll say maybe there isn't as much competition, or there's like the lack of retail outlets for third-tier cities where you might get one shopping mall per kind of 1.2 million people. What's your view on those statements? Do you agree?
Well, I think there's one I'd kind of have a question mark over, and that's the one at the bottom, okay? Which is Chinese firms can succeed very rapidly in the local market because there's a lack of retail outlets in the third-tier cities. There is a lot of retail outlets in China because China is there's a lot of shops and a lot of opportunities to spend money. But some of the newer stuff, they didn't go from setting up shops. Like you wouldn't go and set up a shop for selling mobile phones anymore because you would just do that online. So I remember I said at the outset going straight to mobile. So it's just a different channel, if you will. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we need to understand what second tier and third tier city is. So first tier is Shenzhen, Chengdu, Chongqing, where Shanghai and Beijing. These are the first tier cities. They have populations in excess of 15 to 20 million. The second tier cities, such as Dalian, which is a place I've been to, they would have populations, say, 8 to 12 million. In other words, they're the size of London. Okay. The third tier cities are cities from 1 to 6 million. So these are no small things by European standards. Yeah, these are cities of 1 million plus people. So they're not that under-resourced. Okay, first of all. Okay. Secondly, remember the Chinese government has a very tight control over what people are saying, what people are doing. So there is a different type of regulation, or maybe it might be third. But I think the one that I find most interesting, and I think it's a mindset, and that's the Western companies focus on a few core areas, whereas Chinese companies do everything from cloud to digital payment like WeChat. So there's an orthodoxy in the West around stick to the knitting for certain companies, and actually the stock market and the analysts have this view that we pick the winners, we pick the asset classes, you focus on delivering results in that particular asset class. So you'll see things like, say, for instance, Pearson sold off the Financial Times to focus on education and training, yeah? And they were previously a conglomerate with 5 or 6 different types of businesses, and then they gradually sold them off to focus on education and training. And that is a thing that is a Western way of thinking, which is focus on the thing that you're supposed to be good at, and we as the stock market will pick who the winners are, and we'll pick how to allocate our own asset classes rather than you allocating the asset classes. Whereas in China, they don't think like that, even if they're publicly quoted, because the market is moving so fast. They're typically led by strong-willed people like Jack Ma. And thirdly, when the opportunity is there, they have this concept called competing on the edge, whereby they build on the existing capabilities and then compete on the edge of what's possible. So they use existing capabilities to leapfrog into new areas for innovation. So as a result, they have a really open mind in innovation. They've got a very fast-moving thinking around iterating to test and learn. Whereas I think innovation in the West is very much, if you lose and you don't win on your particular new product launch, careers are on the line. They don't have that sort of thinking. It's very much, we'll go where the opportunity is, whereas the market here in Europe says, we tell you where market to focus on.
Right, yeah. So the question is, will any of the countries, any of the big organizations in the West go down that route? But I guess that would be...
Well, they are actually doing this, but it's kind of hidden.
Yeah.
It's kind of hidden in plain sight. Okay, so if you look at Facebook, originally an app which was kind of around community, and then they're doing balloons to download to broadcast the web. They're also doing Oculus Rift. They're also doing Facebook Messenger, Facebook Payment, and then Facebook for business. Ostensibly, you could argue that these are all unconnected businesses, that they should do their own thing. But actually, they're mimicking, in my view, and this is my subjective view, they're mimicking what's happening in China, which is We're placing our bets on a few things. If one bet takes off, we'll place all the bets on that to the next thing. And I think the very good example of that is how Facebook Messenger, I think there's 2 billion users, having gone from not a lot. And they also believe, I know because I was talking to Facebook yesterday, they believe that the next platform won't be social, it'll be something to do with VR, so they're not going to get left behind. Whereas orthodox and Western thinking is somebody else should come up with that, but not the company who's focusing on building social media. So actually, I think both Google, Facebook, and Amazon have actually Western strategies. Just one final point on that, actually. We all know about Amazon Web Services. It grew 55% year on year from 2015 to 2016. But it's a long way from offering cloud-based computing services to selling books, and yet they still allow to do it by the stock market.
Yeah, yeah. In the same article, I talked about Tencent unveiling a service that will allow European firms to sell directly to China on WeChat. Do you think that's going to be a game changer?
I think once Western firms, the problem with the road to China is access. How do you get access to the market? Because you can't just go and set up a www website address and start selling commerce. You have to go to what the market is doing, market on WeChat. And I think once people start understanding the power of WeChat and what it can do, quite far-sighted thinking companies will go after that market and go after it via WeChat. But I still think it's kind of hidden in the background because people don't believe and don't understand the scale of it. And I have to put my hand up and say, this time a year ago, and remember I run the biggest digital marketing conference in Ireland, I would have gone, WeChat, what are you talking about? Yeah. But then when I would go out for dinner in Shanghai and I see everybody's got their phone in front of their face and people will only communicate with you on WeChat, and random people you've met will phone you via WeChat, you start tuning into the context and you see the capabilities.
Yeah, and as you're saying, accessing China will be the question. And that brings us to one of the big questions. We host these series of seminars, and they're very much focused on going global and on people's experience and companies' experience and advice. So from your perspective, Colin, and from OpenJaw Technologies' perspective, what have you found to be the challenges with going global, and what kind of lessons learned or advice could you provide to the audience here today about that whole going global?
Well, I know the success of OpenJaw in China was built by a commitment from one of the original founders. He spent a lot of time building the relationships, and if we just take the China and Asia perspective that we've got, I would argue that companies who are good at building relationships, and I'm going to put my green jersey on here for Ireland, I would say many Irish firms are very good at building relationships, building rapport, and the business starts with being rapport building and relationship building, and then the commercials come second. Okay, it's not a transactional relationship in Asia, and it is one of the reasons why I believe European firms can do very well, because you don't see the world in a transactional view. So if you're going to start out in Asia in particular, and by the way, I also know that's the case in a lot of, say, Latin American markets, relationship first, commercials second, and have that frame of reference. In many markets, business is done on a, if you will, a more old school basis, which is the judge of your character and who you are as a person and whether they like you, rather than whether I've just got this product to sell and it's like the product is the standalone item. So that'll be the first thing. So make the commitment to the relationship, and be ready to tailor it for their market. We have a version of our main core product tailored to the Chinese market, and rather than go and say buy our stuff, it's working great in Europe, we totally reverse entry that, and we said, what can we do with our product to make it work for you? And that was actually what happened. That's what our success has been built on.
Okay, excellent. And really, just to recap then, Colin, from all our conversation here today, if our audience here were to take three main things, not to put you on the spot, but putting you on the spot, what would the three main takeaways be from our conversation today that you would like our audience to bring with them?
One thing is just get more tuned into what China is doing at the same time as throwing away your preconceptions. In other words, what you read in the paper, ignore all that. Do your own homework. There's a book by Edward Say on the new Chinese entrepreneurs, and it's very, very, very interesting. If you want, Aoife, I'll give people the references that I'm referring to book-wise that they can go and follow up. And these, when you do the proper homework on China and to what's happening there, your frame of reference will be totally changed. The second thing is, if you are thinking of this, I would really encourage you go to both a first-tier city like Shenzhen or Shanghai, and just walk around going, okay, what am I seeing here? What's going on here? The commitment to the future, the positive thinking, the forward outlook is like they're building the future together. And so that's why I say get rid of your preconceptions. See this as a powerhouse that's going to continue. Look at some of these second-tier cities, such as Dalian. Dalian is a very nice city. It's got weather kind of like here in Dublin. It's on the beach, on the water, clear air, great food. There's 10,000 IBM employees in one particular location alone. So getting your head around the scale and the opportunity and their hungriness to deal externally. And I think the third thing would be to say that there's a lot of hidden gems out there, and do your own homework rather than believe anything that you see or read in the paper. That's really my thing. I've totally changed my perspective in the last year. So when you see the words WeChat, pick up your ears, delve into it, download it, try and understand and see what's happening. And that's why I say the future of mobile, the future of e-commerce, the future of payment, China has already done it. So understand that and you know where we're going. You can see both Google and Facebook's roadmap in what's already happening with China.
Excellent takeaways, Colin. Thank you very much for that. And now we're going to open it up to any questions that we may have. Simon, do you have any questions in from the listeners today?
Yeah, we have just two quick ones. I think, Colin, you may have answered quite a bit of this in your last number of answers, but it's really about companies that are looking to expand into Asia, and in particular into the Chinese market, and any advice you'd have on a company that's looking to go global in China. I'm very conscious of what you just said there about doing your own.
But you have to look for partnerships, Ned. That's one of the things I should have said. You got to look for partnerships. You can't do it on your own. You got to find your champion, if you will. So I know in the context of OpenJaw, they found their champion in TravelSky, which is well before the acquisition. Our founder, one of our founders, John Colin, spent a lot of time on the ground building rapport, building relationships, and building the context with TravelSky. And so find a partner. In our case, obviously, it was the biggest travel tech firm in China, TravelSky. But there are plenty of comparisons there. And find a person and find a name. And because China is incredibly entrepreneurial and it's all about family, typically you would find maybe a partner who is the person who runs the company, owns the company, or is a senior figurehead in the company. They're your ideal partner for you. I mean, obviously, TravelSky is a different scale because it's a multi-billion-dollar company, but these still, it's very much a relationship-driven business, and you obviously want to have ideally deal with people who get the West and understand the West where possible. Because although there is there's a language, I also would find somebody who ideally speaks English straight away, because there is a language barrier even for those who are very good English speakers. I think the second thing is just be patient. Before even I joined OpenJaw, I had a lot of experience working in Asia, and it's not really about getting married on the first date, that's for sure.
Sure, and you mentioned there about the language barrier also, and I think from our perspective, just to answer that caller's question as well, it's very important to understand that the Chinese consumer is not likely to buy online unless they can understand what they're buying and understand the payment process that's happening. So, I guess
actually, Aoife, that's the point there. Aoife, it's like when you've got a big 1.4 billion market, they don't need to learn a foreign language.
Yeah.
You just don't. They don't need to learn English now. It's not just as a vignette for you when you drive around or walk around the likes of so Dalian, middle class city, a lot of well-educated people. Only the young people might speak a few words of English. So you have to assume everybody only speaks Chinese. Therefore, you've got to go local immediately.
Yep, fantastic. Great.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for those answers there, and of course, great to finish on a point about how important it is to go local, Aoife. We're not going to go through any more questions. If we do have some more questions, we'll get back to people individually, just in the interest of time. We do want to thank Colin for your insights today, Colin. We found that very insightful, and thank you very much to Colin Lewis, the Chief Marketing Officer at OpenJaw Technology, amongst other things.
Thank you very much.
And to Aoife Murphy, the Strategic Director over here at Vistatec. We hope you've enjoyed this session in terms of what China can teach us about the future of digital. And as we said at the very start, there will be a full recording available to people within the next day or so. We will get that out to you. We do have a number of these webinars that we're running. If you'd like to find out more, the usual social networks, at least from a European and an American perspective, such as Facebook and LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You can follow Vistatec there, and that's where we normally let people know about the upcoming webinars. So all I want to do now is say thank you once again to everybody for joining, and thank you once again to our hosts. We hope you've enjoyed this.